Here to give us some insight into the president's plan of action for this election is Jason Meister, a member of the Trump 2020 Advisory Board. Jason, I want to start with really giving the argument for the president's second term. Some people weren't necessarily pleased with the outline that he said during his Fox News town hall. He has been outspoken, though, about what he's looking to do in the second term, or rather what is up for stake in a potential second term. So for people who may not know, what is the president and Republicans voting for come 2020?
Yeah, this election is about the core values of America. They are under attack. It's not just America. It's not just our nation that's under attack. It's the core values: family, hard work, keeping the fruits of our labor. So what we have to understand is that Joe Biden really is radical Joe, because he is a frail old man, and the radical left are going to backdoor, basically have him be their puppet, be their way to get in and overthrow this democracy. You see it happening across this country in all the Democrat-run cities. They're burning to the ground, vandalism. You have murders. You have the Chaz set up. I mean, so I think that that's what's at stake in this election. It's a very consequential election.
And we are coming up at about 4 months until people start casting their ballots in the November election. But even before then, some early voting, absentee voting, if you will, does begin in some states in just about 2 or 3 months from now. So it is just around the corner. And some people, I know that they'll say that polls, I mean, look what happened in 2016, but polls are showing that Joe Biden is at least building on his lead a little bit as he continues to kind of stay away from the public. Are you getting to the point where you are concerned about polls at all, or is this something that looks like 2016 once again and you're not too worried about it?
So it's a fair question. I think we do need to keep our eye on those polls, but I think we need to look at them in a context. I think that people are even more scared today of showing their support for President Trump than they were in 2016. So that sort of theme you're gonna see that unfold even more in 2020. But I also think you have to understand that there's a huge enthusiasm gap between Joe Biden and President Trump that you didn't even have exist with Hillary Clinton. I've never met a passionate Joe Biden supporter in my life. I can say the same for Bernie Sanders. Yeah. He had very passionate support. He drew large crowds like President Trump, maybe not quite as big, but he drew large crowds. With Biden, you have no enthusiasm. So it's really, Biden is almost irrelevant. It's the pro-Trump vote versus the anti-Trump vote and who comes out for the election.
I think that's an excellent point. And even when we're talking about enthusiasm, too. For example, in the primaries, I heard the storyline that black voters really coming out overwhelmingly in support of Joe Biden. But the issue that when I look at that, too, is that enthusiasm that you're talking about. Will they come out in numbers come the general election? It's one thing to get a percentage of black voters. It's another thing to bring out new black voters. And I'm not sure if Joe Biden necessarily brings that enthusiasm for a lot of them, acknowledging his record on a lot of these issues. We could go to the crime bill. We could go to the war on drugs that he helped with. We can go to back what Kamala Harris said about him during the primary. And now Kamala Harris looks like she might be the VP. It's someone who didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. She wasn't very popular during the primary. Do you think that that would be a good pick for his campaign? And if not, do you think someone else would be a better one?
I think it's an okay pick. I don't think it's a great pick, but I think it's almost irrelevant because I think you're going to see President Trump get a very large percentage of the black vote. I think that that's why the Democrats are pushing these race wars, because they know that he's really getting into those black voters. Because if you look at since the rioting started, he's gone up nearly 50% in likely voters' support from the African-American community. Why? Because all this defunding the police, disbanding the police forces, that puts who pays the steepest price for that? Minority communities, Black America. They're going to pay the steepest price if we defund the police. And people realize that. They understand that. They want law and order. They don't want their cities burning, and they want law and order, and they want protection.
I think you're exactly right, because even when we look at people who are supportive of the protests going on right now, as soon as you bring up the rioting, the looting, the destruction of even the statues, I mean, people may not like Confederate flags or statues, but they don't like the idea of bringing them down by violence without due process or a legislative effort in order to do so. For example, we see yesterday Mississippi changing its flag, and they did so through the legislative action. And it's worth noting, I think, too, that a lot of people don't mention that it was a Republican legislature and a Republican governor who followed through on those actions. That's something that was conveniently left out of a lot of the articles that I was reading about yesterday. So when we get to November, is this going to be a big issue that contrasts the president and Joe Biden, or do you think it'll be something else, maybe China, coronavirus response, something like that?
I do not. I think the biggest contrast, there's two big contrasts: the economy and jobs. Right? You have Trump is a job creator. He's the best job president we ever had. And you saw he built the greatest economy, and he's going to do it all over again. You saw those May job numbers; they were through the roof. Economists predicted we'd lose 8.5 million jobs. We gained 2.5 million jobs. You saw the retail sales. He is an economic wizard. And I think that Joe Biden's record and Barack Obama's record was they presided over the weakest and flattest recovery in U.S. history. So there's no greater contrast there. But I also think, going back to my earlier statements, I think this election is about an attack on America's core values. And I think that President Trump is going to preserve America's core values, make our core values great again. And that's what I think is the other large contrast coming in November.
It's an interesting point, and I actually think you're right, because it's something that not only people are a little bit scared to speak out about when you come to the support of President Trump, as you were mentioning before, but it's something that the media won't even touch. So people aren't going to get a fair grasp of exactly what's going on at this very moment, and polls won't reflect that, I don't think, either. But come November, that's when people will have their anonymity when they go to the ballot box, and I think that's when we'll see exactly where people stand. But Jason Meister, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.